So today our topic is about High Renaissance in Italy, and especially we are going to consider art of Venice. So Venice has always been like an outstanding territory, though it was inside Italy, as we understand, but it has its own specificity in development. It stood like out from other Italian cities, and besides that, however, Venice had also served as crossroads of Italy, a place where East and West came to meet. As a result, its art and culture have always been a bit different. Historically, Byzantine East and Gothic West met in Venice. At the fine art, painting, sculpture, and architecture produced during the late 14th and early 15th centuries reveal the international type of Renaissance. So it combined in it some features of other countries, cultures, and art. So it's like the combination of two parts, like East and West together, Byzantine East and Gothic West. So it's what you should underline for yourself and what you should write down. The first great artist whose creativity we're going to consider is Giorgione. Among the most important exponents of Venetian colorism he was. His true name is Giorgio da Castelfranco. He was born circa 1477 or 1478 and died in 1510. So we can see that he lived, unfortunately, comparatively not a long life. His paintings are filled with deep lyricism and contemplation. He used to use saturated color palette in transparent layers with soft outline. What is interesting about his creativity, and we'll see that later on, that comparing to other artists of Renaissance who focused their attention totally on a human being, like on the highest peak of development of God's creation in this world, but he put the human in the landscape surrounding, and in his compositions usually we'll see that landscape it covers even the biggest part of composition. Not a human is in the center. We can see that his creativity provides the disclosure of poetry and harmony, and most important features are harmonious connection of man and nature. So this artwork is one of the most famous. It is called Judith. So this picture is based on the biblical story from the Old Testament when a young widow, Judith, she made in her small city, there came enemies with Holofernes in ahead of them. They came there to conquer their city, and at night time she made him fall in love with her, and when he was sleeping, she cut off his head, and that's how she preserved her native city from being conquered. Anyway, despite of the, I can say, quite cruel subject, it's about killing, it's about fighting with enemies. So anyway, we'll see that here Giorgione depicts Judith in an extremely harmonious way. So we can notice here the principles of aesthetics of not only Renaissance period in general, but it's like the turning to the traditions of Greek antiquity. We see here the position that is called contrapost, as we remember it. So when a figure is standing, her weight is on one foot only, and another foot is a little bit curved, like this. And so this is the posture when the inner movement, like she is statical from one point of view, but from another we can feel somehow some inner movement here. There is no visual glance connection of Judith with the viewer. It's like in this type of enclosed composition when she is inside of her own thoughts. Also, we can notice that this young woman, she has just killed a man, but we can see that there is even a slight smiling on her face. There is something mysterious about that. And again, this figure is shown on the background of nature with its landscape, with the usage of air perspective, where we can notice clearly there is division of front ground, the middle ground where she is, and the background with the landscape, trees and distant hills or rocks and some city. So the next artwork is called The Tempest. The Tempest was painted circa 1505. In other sources we can see other dates like from 1506 and 1508. So anyway, we should remember that it was the beginning of the 16th century. The subject of the composition is somewhat ambiguous. It may represent a scene from some classical poem. Another, so probably because there is no clear information. What we should notice about this composition is again the unity of people with nature. So nature here is, we can say, more than just a simple background. It reflects probably some drama, some tragic, some feelings of these heroes, their story that is reflected in this environment, in this cloudy skies, even in the stormy sort of weather. So there is some dialogue between these heroes, but it's also not too like an obvious dialogue, so some emotional probably connection between these heroes, some love story maybe. Another famous composition is called The Three Philosophers. It conveys a similarly vivid mood and is also an unusually sensitive study of the various effects of light, sometimes characterized as the three ages of man or three temperaments. The separate identities of the figures are clearly established, and they appear against the landscape of great beauty, as we see. Each may represent a different philosophical tradition. It has been suggested like the Christian, Arab, and Hebrew, as may be identified by their highly individualized dress. Like the saints in the Renaissance altarpiece, each man is absorbed in its own speculations. So we can see that they are like inside of their thoughts deeply, and we see that they are like together, but at the same time we see that they are in their own world, like they are absorbed by their own thoughts and feelings probably also. And again, human and nature are in unity. This artwork is called Sleeping Venus. From Italian, it sounds like venire dormente. And also, I should remind you that such kind of iconography of Venus is called Venus pudica. That is translated like shy Venus. So because she is hiding her nakedness with her arm. Let's pay attention to the general compositional features and again the unity of the human's body with the landscape. The general orientation of the canvas is horizontal here, and the body of this young woman, so actually a goddess, according to the plot of this depiction. So it somehow reminds us the outlines of the hills, the outlines of this middle ground and background also. We can notice that so the landscape backdrop is also much more than just some scenery behind her back. We can feel the real balance of this composition, and so the artist created some special mood together along with the figure, creates a wonderful harmonious unity. This painting, by the way, I should mention here that later on we'll see the artwork by Titian, that is called Sleeping Venus also, by the way, and even the compositional features, even the color combinations will be very close to Giorgione's Sleeping Venus. So there are some features, of course, of high Renaissance painting here, where this beauty, this lady is depicted with a dreamy lyricism and with the usage of this sfumato technique, sfumato coloring, with the refined mixing of color pigments and the blend of figurative and scenic elements. By the way, she is not the first life-size nude of the Italian Renaissance, because before that we should remember there appeared Botticelli's Birth of Venus, painted in 1484. That was the first nude in Renaissance period after, so we remember that in medievalism time nudity was not typical for creativity in general. The exception was the depiction of, for example, Adam and Eve, but that's because it was so written in the Bible text. And so nudity was more typical for antiquity times, for ancient Greece, for ancient Roman period, as we remember, yeah. And by the way, there is also a great philosophical idea in the depiction of nude people, nude figures. So this is the idea of ideal, something ideal. Because when different gods were depicted naked, it meant that they had nothing to hide, so that they were so perfect themselves that they did not need clothes. And another idea of the nakedness is truth unhidden. So everything is shown, everything, again, nothing to hide, everything is here, everything is opened. So that's later this topic we'll see how it developed in Titian's creativity. So also I'd like to draw your attention to color combinations. And so we see that the combinations of a bright saturated green of the landscape and deep red of the front ground, they enrich one another and they make them even more like powerful. These color combinations, they like create this powerful unity of bright opposite colors. So from the point of view of a general color palette, like from a rainbow color palette, so we remember that opposite color to green is red, and for example to blue is yellow. So and other colors act the same. It's the law of opposites. Then Titian. Titian became the most celebrated portraitist of his time, and not only portraitist. We'll see that he painted predominantly on mythological subjects also, but his main subject anyway was the depiction of human being, of personality, so that's what he was really interested in. We'll see also that he was so much affected, like he was inspired by the depiction of women's beauty, the naked beauty of women's body also. So Titian's deft ability to grasp the personality or character of the sitter is really remarkable. The influence of Titian's achievements were probably not felt until the 17th century, when the countless artists from Italy and Northern Europe, they journeyed to Venice to study and absorb his style. So just let's again think about that some really genius artists, they found their followers, they found the respect in just general, I mean in a total way, just in centuries. So they were understood in centuries. And it's not only Titian, is not only like the only example of this. But anyway, in his lifetime, he was also quite necessary artist, so we'll see that from the amount of artworks that he left, so that people ordered portraits, and actually, yeah, he was really master. By the way, he lived quite a long life, up to 90 years, and even when he was deeply in his 80s, he just mentioned, he left this message for us that so he said that I only now in my 80s I start understanding the painting. I start to understand how to do it, fulfilled with the creativity that he could not imagine his life without it. Here one of his famous artworks that is called Secret and Profane Love. So these are two female figures who appear physically similar, but whose clothing is so different and need to be assigned identities. Against the sunset landscape, we have richly dressed women's clothing. So one woman is richly dressed here on the left side, as we can see it. We see that she's holding roses and also some bowl here. In the background, by the way, there is such kind of interesting element as two rabbits. So here it is, and so these two rabbits, they are the symbol of the wish of a large offspring as a result of this future marriage. So this is not a portrait of a particular person, of a particular lady, as we understand, but we can say that it is an idealized image. Probably it was painted for some particular woman, of course. But anyway, firstly, from the art historian point of view, it is allegory of happy marriage. If clothed woman, she embodies the profane love, then because she is totally covered with clothing, and this clothing is like contemporary clothing for the Renaissance period, for the beginning of 16th century. Then another woman, this is the embodiment of sacred love, according to the main principle that I have mentioned before, that actually something perfect, goddesses and gods, from the point of view of antiquity tradition, they don't need to be dressed up because they are perfect as they are. They have nothing to hide here. So also we can notice here that let's look attentively at her gesture, of the gesture of the sacred love lady that represents the sacred love. Her hand is rising up to the skies. She is holding such kind of lamp with some candles. She is holding it, and this way she is also like dealing with it. It is emphasized by this gesture that she is dealing with heavens. Eternal, she is transformed into eternal, into heavenly. Another artwork here is the portrait of a man with a quilted sleeve. Here are the main principles of the Renaissance portrait preserved. So we see that the artist paid all the attention in this composition to the sitter himself. So to this man, he tried to depict his inner world, his inner statement. So we can say that this is psychological portrait. All the attention is here in the glance of this person. What helped an artist to create such kind of effect? Focus our attention on the sitter. Firstly, that is a smooth background that gives us no extra information. This background has grayish tonality, middle tonality, and we see that this dark hair are like the enframing for this light, like lighted face that is shown here in 3/4 position. Also, we remember here the principle of triangle shape of composition that was typical for Leonardo da Vinci and Raphael Sanzio's creativity. So we can imagine that there is like triangle shape, so we can just draw it with our imagination, and again we remember the best traditions of Italian Renaissance. Also about the effect illusion of three-dimensional space. Titian used a typical compositional way here, so he puts the elbow of the hero on this portico here on the front ground, and he exaggerates this volume of the sleeve, and this way it looks like the entrance to the composition. So it's so much detailed, this part of clothing, that even some facial features, also the shaded part of his face, is not that detailed, emphasized as this front ground. So this painting is called Denarius of Kaiser, or the tribute money, painted circa 1516. The subject is taken from the New Testament story. So one of the students of Christ asked teacher if they should pay if the citizens of Judea should pay the bills to the Roman Empire Kaiser, because the Rome was very far. So Kaiser, no one saw Kaiser. But Jesus said that let's give to God what is God's, and let's give to Kaiser what is Kaiser's. So this is the picture where Titian focuses all the attention of the viewer on the images of Jesus. All the attention is on Christ and Pharisee. So we see here the meeting of two opposite worlds. The world of lofty ideas and reality, as if holds together and completes, creates a connection and extensive contrast between the thin hand of Jesus Christ, which never touches the coin pointed to Christ, and the powerful hand of Pharisee squeezing the silver denarius. Titian refused any details All attention is concentrated on the monumental figures of heroes. The figure of Christ majestically dominates in the picture, filling the picture almost entirely. It stands out against the dark background with a chord of pink, red, and blue shades. So another artwork here is the Assumption of the Virgin Mary, the scale artwork created as an altarpiece, as we see it here, created in 1518 for the Church of Santa Maria Gloriosa del Frari in Venice. We remember that, for example, in Orthodox churches of the same time, we can't see the altar part so clearly because it is hidden with the iconostasis and all the images of the Lord, of the Virgin Mary, and the plots from the Bible, like depictions of different sceneries from the New Testament predominantly. So they are all there in iconostasis that divides the nave, the naos, the main part of the temple where the prayers are standing during the liturgy, and so it divides from the altar part. And in Catholic churches, the situation is different. So when we enter the church, we can clearly see what is going on inside the altar part. And so that's one of the reasons why the main subjects were so in the view of pictures on biblical subjects, they were put there inside of the altar pieces. And so this was the central part of the composition in general. So Titian, in the composition Assumption of the Virgin, he divides this space of composition into two parts according to the principle of golden proportion here. So we see that like two of three parts is covered with the earthly space is depiction, and 1/3 is the topic of, so the earthly segment is shown here, like two worlds divided by the row of clouds that are held by small angels that in Italian art tradition are called puto, puzzi or puto. So the Virgin Mary is after she, like, we shouldn't say died, but so after her transition, I can say, from this earthly world, from this space, earthly space, to the heavenly space. So she is taken to the heavens. She is like rising there, and we can feel it. We can see it even from the gestures of her rising hands. And so she is reaching the heavenly space where the Lord is waiting for her. We also can notice that there are plenty of angels depicted here according to sacred texts. Angels, so there are plenty of angels in heavens, and they are all very close to the Lord himself. Also, we can notice that angels are not only in this like material shape depicted by Titian, like this, like here, but also there in the upper part of composition. These are like highlighted images of angels, their faces, their bodies, and so we can hardly see them, we can hardly notice them from the first point of view, but later on we start to admire them like a part of composition. This effect, this compositional principle element was also shown in the artwork by Raphael Sanzio, the Sistine Madonna, because I hope you remember that on the background behind the Virgin Mary with Jesus in her arms, there is also the depiction of like heavenly space with plenty of faces of different small angels like puto. The lower part of composition is fulfilled with figures of the witness of this event, of this Assumption of the Virgin. So we see that they are so much impressed by what is happening. They are raising their hands to the skies. They are praying to the Virgin. They are like really so impressed with this. So the composition is so colorful. We can notice it from this slide. It is so powerful from the point of view of persuasiveness of all its features that just when we enter the space of the Church of Santa Maria Gloriosa, we just notice it from this great distance. Another famous artwork by Titian is the monumental painting The Presentation of the Virgin at the Temple, that was painted between 1534 and 1538. It is located in the Church of Holy Prophet Jeremiah in Venice. So here we notice, so first let's remember the subject. There was such kind of tradition in Judea to present the first child in each family to the Lord. And so that's what we can see here. When the Virgin Mary reached the 3 years old age, so she was presented, she was given to be brought up in the church. So that's what we see. So it's like illustration of what is described in saint texts of Bible. So we can notice that the small figure of the Virgin dressed in a blue, like heavenly blue color, she is climbing up the stairs, and she is reaching this highest point at the entrance to the church, to the temple that is going to become her home for a comparatively long period before the Annunciation, by the way. Then we see that there are a lot of witnesses of this event are depicted. So these are, as usual in Renaissance art, all these people are shown, so they are dressed up in the clothes traditional for Titian's period, for the first part of the 16th century, not for the times of when the Virgin Mary lived. We also see here the clear division of the composition into the front ground. So let's see that there is an old woman sitting here, like close to the stairs. Then the middle ground where all the main events are happening. Then the back, and also we can say that the middle ground is also here, and the background also. So the background is fulfilled with the natural elements for what purpose they are depicted there? For the increasing of this three-dimensional effect. Also, we see that artists emphasized on depicting architectural elements because they are also so much important to show this three-dimensional space, to show that you see, it's like the attempt also to create the effect that the space of this church, I mean the real architectural space, that it is much wider than it's like in reality. So this depiction, its three-dimensional features, it really increases the effect of, it creates the effect as if this inner part of church, real church, I mean, that it is more spacious, much more spacious than it is truly. The next artwork is called the Venus of Urbino, created in 1538. So there are different versions of interpretation of this Titian's artwork, the depiction of nude beauty. According to one of them, the picture symbolizes the bond of marriage. Perhaps Titian connected the erotica with the virtues of marriage, and above all, there is the topic of loyalty. By the way, such kind of symbolical elements as the dog lying at the feet of this model, it just saying about that. So it depicts the loyalty and it's like personifies it. Nudity in Renaissance was the embodiment of moral purity, chastity, truth, that contrasted by Renaissance dresses as the opposite meanings of truth naked and truth embellished. That's important. Titian also used such kind of symbols as roses, for example, because roses are always symbol of love, a symbol of passion, and we also notice that on the background there are images of maids, so probably they are getting ready to dress their lady up to prepare her for a day, just or to prepare for some special event maybe. So let's again return to the previous slide and look in general at this composition. So the main principles of the composition, they really remind us Giorgione's Sleeping Venus, as we remember it, And this model is also oriented horizontally. In this composition, this is iconography of Venice pudico, so like modest Venus, shamed Venus. Her general figure, it really reminds us a pearl that is you see that her body is very smoothly depicted, so she is so tender, and it is also underlined thanks to the contrast that artist gives here. So it's the deep green again and the deep pink here, pink and green, deep red, deep green, and together they create this powerful combination of the opposite colors. So the artist gives these accents here and there, so he makes this artwork really shine, really picturesque. Also, he uses different patterns here, like on the front ground here and on the background also, so they become real decor for this wonderful image. Another depiction is called the Penitent Magdalene. It is, I remind you that she was one of the students of Jesus Christ. So she was the first person who saw Jesus after his resurrection, but she firstly didn't understand that it was Jesus, her teacher. And so this picture was painted in 1555 to 1565 with oil on canvas. So this image, it reflects Mary Magdalene while she is praying to Lord. Saint Mary Magdalene, she is depicted here in the moment of repentance. That is underlined, that is shown through the image, through her glance that is directed to heavens. Her glance, her eyes are fulfilled with tears here. We see also it from her gesture of her arm that is like put on her chest, close to the heart. It's also about, so what about the attributes that we see here? This is an open book, that means a moment of praying, that means the moment of connection with the sacred text, the moment of trying to reach closer to God, to understand His will. And also we see here a skull. So skull is always the symbol of like reminder of death. It's a reminder of fast flying earthly life. And so it embodies the idea that is called like memento mori. Memento mori, remember about death. That is how it is translated. Also, we should pay attention to the background. There are some, so the nature there is also quite dramatic. So it's not about, so it's not the bright daylight, for example, and it's also not the clear nighttime. So it's like some transitional moments also depicted, like for example the first rays of sunlight, or oppositely, it was probably more obvious that these are the last rays of sunlight closer to evening time. Also, we can see here a bowl filled with pure water. It can be identified by different ways. One of them is, firstly, it's like one of attributes of Mary Magdalene, because she was a mirror bearing, so that is like one of her symbols. Another symbol is purity, because fulfilled bowl of water, fulfilled with pure water, glass bowl, it's always the symbol of pure soul, again, of a soul that returns to the Lord. The composition Christ carrying the cross, it's based on the text from New Testament according to three of the evangelists, Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Here are depicted, all the attention is paid to the image of Jesus Christ on the front ground, and the depiction of Simon. Simon, the person, the man who helped Jesus to carry the cross when he became exhausted. Titian reduced the narrative elements to a minimum, accentuating the scene's dramatic qualities. His decision to place the figures in the very close foreground was like to bring the faces of these two men close together on either side of the diagonal created by the cross. And so we somehow can feel this like relationship between them, the sorrow, the glance of Christ fulfilled with tears, with suffering, and the face of Simon that sympathizes all the situation. So Titian also prominently depicts the elements that show Christ's suffering. It's not only his glance, through his glance, but also look at the rope around his neck, the crown of thorns, and the drops of blood on his face. So the most moving element, however, is Christ's tearful gaze directed squarely at the viewer as a call to join him. This aspect of the composition is quite comparatively unusual for Titian's creativity. So, and now we're going to continue with the art of a late Renaissance. It's about the second half of the 16th century, and also, we are still talking about Italian art. In Italy of the 16th century, so the late Renaissance period, we see such kind of stylistic direction that appeared in Yuan that is called Manierism. That period that lasted from the High Renaissance around 1520 to Baroque period up to 1590. Comes from the Italian word maniera or style, in the scene of the artist's characteristic touch or recognizable manner. What is typical for Manierism stylistics? So these are elongated proportions that are not realistic anyway. This is intense contrast and lighting, and also twisted poses. So a movement from realism, from realistic proportions, it also emphasizes in the emotional side of what is depicted here. And also it creates such kind of special effect of style. But not all artists change the proportions of figures, so Manierism is not only about that. We'll see that later on. What about the keywords for this stylistic direction? These are like dark, twisted shadows, dramatism, the depiction of clouds, and also, that is very important, is asymmetry, asymmetrical composition. So please notice that. Asymmetry that leads to the depiction of dynamicism anyway. One of the representatives of Manierism stylistics is artist Parmigianino. Please also write down. One of the really genius artists of late Renaissance period was Paolo Veronese, and here is his creativity, The Supper at Emmaus, painted in 1559. Paolo Veronese, or in his true name Paolo Cagliari, his artworks usually were very huge. They vastly peopled canvases depicting allegorical, biblical, and historical subjects in splendid color and set in a framework of classicizing Renaissance architecture. He was a master of the use of color and set in the framework. He also used to depict the illusionary compositions that extend the eye beyond the actual. So they create this effect, they create the unity with the space or real architectural space, and they create this effect of more spacious room, for example, so where these images were depicted. Veronese was considered one of the greatest masters of color, so he is called colorist. One of these great artists such as Titian, Rubens, and Rembrandt. He was typically aligned with the Manierists. Somehow we can also compare his creativity, his color palette to Raphael or Michelangelo Buonarroti. So everything can be understood in comparing something to something. That's why we can say that Paolo Veronese was the great master of High Renaissance. So the Manierists produced stylistic compositions, so they showed their preference for sophisticated elegance. Their style features gestural poses, unusual compositions, for example, and also some special lights and perspective effects. They are also the principles of Manierism. So please, let's notice that, let's underline that again. Manierism, it's not only about elongated proportions, for example, so it's not a feature of creativity of each artist of that period. It's also about something unusual, like crowded compositions by figures of people, like here. It's also about the plenitude of colors, and different unexpected light shadow effects, also untypical usage of perspective. So that's what we should understand about manierism and about late Renaissance art in general. So the wedding at Cana, this is the depiction of the New Testament plot story that describes the first moment when Jesus just showed his power, when he created a miracle for these people. Mind you, the story when they came with his Holy Mother, here they are in the central part of composition, Jesus Christ and the Virgin Mary. So they came to the wedding feast. The family, so the young couple, they were comparatively, so they had not enough money to organize a great feast. And they had no wine, so there was also like tradition to give wine to guests, and unfortunately they had none of it. And so the Virgin Mary, she asked her son to make this gift for them and to find some wine for this marriage feast. And so the Lord firstly said that it's not time for that. So he said that it's not time for starting creating miracles. But the Virgin Mary, his Holy Mother, asked again, and only just for her prayers, he created the way that water, just simple water in bowls, it turned into a very good wine. And all the guests were very pleased. We see that this is an image, and it's firstly how it should be understood from the point of view of the plot. Firstly, it's about the fact that the Lord he blessed the marriage because he personally was present at it, so at one of these marriage feasts. So he blessed marriage like something really sacred. Another feature that here it is shown that for the prayers of the Virgin Mary, the Lord can do whatever is necessary. So the fact that Christians should turn for mercy, to ask for the Lord's mercy through praying to Saint Mary. Let's talk about some features of composition. Jesus and Mary are surrounded by luminous auras. They are like halos. You can notice it here, but these are not typical halos as in icon painting, for example, but something more. It's like an attempt to depict this shining in a more naturalistic way, not in a symbolic one. They are joined, however, by not fewer than 130 figures, and while some are clothed in biblical dresses, others look as if they had just walked from palazzo, from some Italian Renaissance palazzo, for example. That is again one of the principles of Renaissance art, the unity of historical reality, of the images from the biblical times with all the necessary features, with the architecture that was typical for Renaissance or for antiquity, and with dressings of the Renaissance time. Pieta. Pieta is translated as crying. We remember, for example, the famous sculpture by Michelangelo Buonarroti. Yeah, we remember that was created in his early 20s, also called Pieta. And this one is a painting by Paolo Veronese, circa 1580. Pieta, again, we see here what is typical from the point of view of manierism tradition, an untypical position. So we see that the body of Jesus Christ is shown here from such an untypical point of view, like frontally here, and the entrance to the composition is shown from the front ground here, from the thorn on the front. Also, we notice that Paolo Veronese, he also painted on the mythological subjects. For example, the rape of Europa is the example here, painted between 1578 up to 1580 with oil on canvas. By the way, I remind you that oil paints, they give the opportunity to the artist to create their artwork for comparatively a long time. So it means that the artist can fulfill his composition with some new details, to replace some element by another one, so to change some elements of composition. And also, what is even more important, that oil painting helps to create this three-dimensional effect. So it helps to create these smooth outlines, to use this sfumato effect. In this artwork, Rape of Europa, we feel how mysterious was Paolo Veronese, because he depicted all these different, you can see just in this close-up version, with the brush strokes of different shape, of different color. So he depicts all the variety of different surfaces, of different fabrics, and also skin, and even creatures here. Susanna and the Elders is the artwork on the Bible story, on the Old Testament story, when the young woman Susanna came to take bath, and so two elders, they were watching her, and this way they made her feel so frustrated, but it's a very simple word for that. This subject, by the way, was very popular among the artists of the Renaissance period and up to nowadays. One of the reasons for that, I suppose, is that this subject, it gives the opportunity for an artist to depict a beautiful young woman, to depict this, I can say, typical individualized images of the man figures, and all this can be depicted in a beautiful surrounding of nature and some architectural elements. Another fragment for you to see just the brushstrokes character. Another artist whose creativity we're going to consider is Tintoretto, born as Jacopo Comin, also called Jacopo Robusti. He lived from 1580 and died in 1594. What is typical about Tintoretto's creativity? He vividly used the oblique perspective technique. He moved away from the traditional interpretation of religious themes. He reinforced genre and philosophical expressiveness, which are combined with ecstatic elevation. So this is his self-portrait, you can see here, and also even from it we can notice that this is like psychological portrait, because this man is he's not having this eye contact with us. He is drawn deeply in his own thoughts and his own emotions. He's as a representative of the late Renaissance artwork, creativity, and Manierism period also. He created again the images on the biblical, predominantly on the biblical subject, but from very extremely unusual sites. So Jacopo Robusti, we should mention that he was a true representative of Manierism. The young Jacopo was trained for a short period by Titian and was a great admirer of Michelangelo. He copied his drawings. So the image Christ washing the disciples' feet here, painted in 1547, reflects the subject when Jesus Christ, showing humility to his disciples, he gives this example of washing their feet, and they felt uncomfortable about that. They asked him either, you, our teacher, should wash our feet. No, we should do that. But he said that if I, your Lord and teacher, doing that, so the same way you should do for each other. So the same way you should act. But you should notice here that artist is not putting this main subject like in the central part of composition. So washing feet is here, by the way, but why doesn't he show it here, somewhere in the central part? As if we are looking at this composition from a door hall, and we are like witnesses of some ordinary, everyday life scenery, but from the times of Jesus Christ. So that creates a real amazing effect, as if we are there, as if all this that is going on is some real situation that is happening just in front of our eyes in this moment. Also, what's interesting that the author, so Tintoretto, he depicts like several sceneries together. So we see different stories are happening at the same time in one composition. Like different compositional centers are united here. And also we notice here some typical Italian architecture of Renaissance, also some Venice sceneries even in the background here. Here is Tintoretto's monumental paintings in Madonna dell'Orto Church in Venice in Italy. So also altarpiece, it's what I was talking about before, so its altar is totally like opened. So we can't enter this space, of course, in Catholic Church also, but we can see it. The composition here is the presentation of the Virgin. So we remember the same topic painted by Titian that we have considered. So this is the same topic, but again, let's pay our attention to the very unusual compositional effects that are used here by the artist. So the point of view, he gives here a low point of view, like if we are also climbing the stairs, like if we're also together with the Saint Virgin Mary as a 3-year-old child, and other people, other witnesses of this event, as if we're also climbing there, coming up to this entrance of this temple. And also let's notice the wonderful effects of lights. So something very unusual here, like it's not a light daytime depicted here. Everything is quite, I can say, dramatic. So it's emphasized here that something really very important from the general human's history point of view is happening here. The composition Crucifixion was painted in 1565. Let's pay attention to its great scale. So it's really amazing. The composition is fulfilled with many figures, and the artist, he showed this moment. So he showed it from the most realistic point of view. He tried to depict it to create this feeling as we are all present there. So this chaos that was going on there, so around Jesus Christ, while he's given his life for the humanity, but all around we can notice that some chaos is happening. All the figures are in rapid movement. All these emotions are shown. Some people are also dressed up, clothes typical for Renaissance. The composition The Last Supper was painted by Tintoretto, especially for Venetian church of San Giorgio Maggiore, where the picture remains up to nowadays. The picture amazes with the courage of the composition, in which the earthly and divine details are skillfully interwoven. The artist captured in the picture the moment when Christ breaks the bread and says the words, "This is my body." The scene is imbued with deep soulfulness and mystical excitement that has touching everyone sitting at this Paschal meal, the first example of Eucharism that Jesus Christ gave through his pupils. So to enhance the mysterious and intensely agitated atmosphere of the miracle happening at the table, the artist resorts the contrast. In the foreground, to the right, he depicts several objects and figures completely unrelated to the plot. On the floor, for example, there are jugs and basket with provisions that the cat peers into. Take a look at the front ground. The tavern owner is like talking about something with the maid, and another woman removes a bowl of fruit from the table here. Also, to create this effect of something mysterious, some miracle, the artist opens also the heavenly mysterious space, so he unites this totally everyday mode with something extraordinary, with the images of angels that are here also present during this Last Supper event.